For many people, the ocean is both one of the most terrorizing, but also one of the most exhilarating places all at once. And that's because behind every nightmare predator in the ocean is a bioluminescent beauty, and beyond each lush landscape is a dark and never-ending abyss. It's this dichotomous relationship that makes the ocean so fascinating in the first place, and by extension, how Subnautica has one of the most complex ecosystems in gaming. In Subnautica, you take on the reins of multiple different characters throughout the games, but in each, the main driver for you is without a doubt the questions of what lies out there. There are tons of different biomes to explore, including the grassy plateaus and kelp forests which lie in the shallow waters, versus the more agonizing depths which lead to otherworldly tapestries like the Fabricator Caverns or the haunting darkness of the Blood Kelp Zone and Void. And within each of these locations is a wide variety of flora and fauna that have learned to survive through any means necessary. For example, in the Safe Shallows, the very first biome in the game you jump into, you can find the crash fish, which are small red fish with a single eye and multiple spikes on their body, which build up sulfur on the tips due to the fact that the crash fish like to hide inside sulfur plants deep within caves. By pushing their spikes into their body when threatened, the crash fish can cause a chemical reaction that results in an explosion that damages the player that kills any nearby animals like peepers or bladderfish. And this is just one example of how intricate and dynamic the zones in Subnautica can get. In other regions like the Lost River, for instance, you can discover massive skeletal remains of gargantuan super leviathans while you are hunted by their much smaller modern-day brethren, or comb through the secret networks of alien vents which helped contain the dangerous Carabacterium, which is slowly killing the entire ocean on this planet. Each and every one of these places has a story of its own to tell, and a very unique one on top of that, which makes exploring around in the game a source of never-ending fun. On top of this too, there is a subtle complexity in the environments, which allows you to safely sit back and watch as animals hunt each other, use nearby plants for safety or building homes, and move together in packs when needed. In the Sea Treader's Path, for example, you can swim next to the Sea Treader Leviathans themselves, as the parents tend to their young and travel through underground tunnels that lead into more fantastical environments like the Grand Reef, with its blue bioluminescent anchor pods attached to what looks like nets or roots. And really, most of the biomes in this game have special features like cave networks or floating islands, and the more and more you explore around any one location, the more you will deduce about how life in these underwater dungeons is, for better and for worse. And while this simulation of sorts isn't nearly as intricate as, say, something like Dwarf Fortress, it does have a special calming effect with a tinge of horror that so few games manage to capture. And this all comes together to make simply existing in the underwater dystopia that is Planet 4546b such a joy, especially when you can gather materials from each zone to build a base which allows you to construct better and better vehicles and gear to explore deeper parts of the trench. It's the type of game that succeeds or fails solely on how well the ecosystems capture a sense of magic, and in the case of Subnautica, they do it so well. It really just never gets old watching a school of fish swim by, or catapulting to the surface and finding massive lily pads with penguins on them, or miles-long Arctic shelves that hide ice worms who pierce through the ice and fight the player. And it goes to show that sometimes for complex ecosystems, you don't even have to spend time designing intricate game systems and protocols, but rather just use some fantastic art and put it all together in such a way that the illusion never breaks. It lets these environments speak for themselves in a way, and means the player can't help but get swept up in it all. I've often been a proponent of the phrase, less is more when it comes to video games. And that's because for me at least, I would rather spend $70 on a 5-hour masterpiece where every second feels sublime, like say Titanfall 2, than 60 hours where half of it is nothing but mindless waste in a boring open world, looking at you, Ubisoft. But sometimes bigger can be better. And in the case of No Man's Sky, it shows us that complex and interesting ecosystems and worlds in games can flourish on pure variety rather than striking depth. With over 18 quintillion planets in total, yes, you heard that right, the universe of No Man's Sky is quite possibly the biggest virtual space ever created. And within this zone of influence is a huge variety of biomes and things to see, including marshlands, lush or barren oases, exotic locations full of islands that float in the sky, scorched fiery hellholes which sprout magma chambers, underwater utopias which stretch out for hundreds of miles, or irradiated wastelands that are more akin to something from Fallout. Each and every one of these places, too, is different in their own way, and is home to a large diversity of plant and animal life alike that have learned to survive in whatever conditions you find. On snowy planets, for instance, many of the life forms grow longer strands of hair to stay warm, and if you build a base in one single location, you can sit by the window and watch the sunset while a pack of carnivores nearby go on a hunt. In a lot of ways, all of this makes No Man's Sky the dream game. The type of open universe exploration simulator that gives birth to ecosystems to just get lost in. However, as cool as the title can be at times, the reason I don't personally love it is because of a lack of depth where other ecosystem first games shine. But still, when you are given this many options to explore, you can't complain too much. And at a base level, the random generation seeds in the game allow for really diverse yet believable environments that just make sense. It never gets old flying into a new planet's atmosphere in anticipation of what you will see next, and especially on the uncommon planets with abundant life, it makes it fun to just simply watch the ecosystem play out from above in the sky. And on top of this too, for years now the game has been getting constant updates and improvements to the way in which internal algorithms generate planets, all in an effort to make them more compelling and fun, and this results in more believable animal behaviors and biospheres that interact with one another more frequently. For example, planets now more commonly have a diverse set of biomes rather than just one, and weather like acid rain plays a more key role in survival and also how planets look after they've formed. So while not every single giant rock is as complex as, say, Dwarf Fortress or Rain World or Kingdom Come Deliverance and its depiction of 15th century Bohemia, when you take into account just how many places there are to see, it's clear why No Man's Sky is one of the most complex ecosystems in games. Because simply, no other game has this many ecosystems. It's a universe generator on a grand scale and manages to, through nothing but chance, sometimes create environments that rival those that were hand-built by people in other games. And truthfully, if someone managed to make No Man's Sky but with even deeper mechanical and immersive elements and a compelling narrative, I think it would potentially be the greatest game of all time. Something akin to, say, Star Citizen and what it's trying to do, for example. But for now, what we do have in No Man's Sky at least gives us an idea of how complex and varied you can make a single game world be. I've been arguing for years now that pretty much every type of game benefits from immersive sim design principles. And in terms of titles that prove this point, I think none do it better than Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. It's an RPG that from the ground up is built to craft a complex and multi-dimensional ecosystem, where the world, rather than acting as a simple backdrop for storytelling, is the story itself. Set in 15th century Bohemia, KCD puts you forth on a journey about vengeance, love, and friendship. But throughout it all, you will be taken aback by sprawling vistas of never-ending countryside, or dense woodlands full of animals that hunt one another, along with bandits that hunt you. But the truly special formula behind this all is just how dynamic the world is. First of all, from a purely aesthetical standpoint, it nails the source material with historical accuracy. Every rutted dirt road or faded wood barn feels genuine and unkept. The cramped dark castles or homes with little light outside of candles show how life actually was during this time period. And walking through a forest as the sunlight peeks through the branches, or seeing a campfire smoke rise into the horizon in the distance never gets old. Churches are full of chipped frescoes and ornate or stone furniture, and taverns are lined with benches and drunkards that will turn violent at a moment's notice. So more than any other medieval game out there, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 really sells the setting, but it only gets more impressive from here. Because the true crowning achievement of KCD 2 is the ecosystems it's created. Every town is a living, breathing place, with vital organs that all conduct how things work. For instance, if you steal or fight in town and get caught, you will have to serve time in the local jails, or if you do heinous enough things, even get sent to the gallows where the game will end completely. Specific wounds require specific remedies, which you must craft in first person using materials you have found in the world while boiling them all in a hot cauldron. Eating and drinking are required to stay alive and healthy, and after big fights, you even need to clean the blood off of your clothes lest people around you freak out or comment about how bad you smell. And it's how these NPCs in the world react to everything you do that makes it feel so complex and lifelike. When talking to a noble, for example, if you are wearing raggedy or torn clothing, they will disregard you and ignore you, thinking you're a peasant. But don the robes of a true king, and they will adorn you with respect. These systems carry over to guards as well, as you are able to put on their gear to remove suspicion from a distance, but get too close and they will not recognize your face. Each piece of gear changes how quiet you are, how quickly you can move, how noticeable you are to animals or humans, and what people will even think of you. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. If you pickpocket someone in town or try to steal from their house without them seeing, nothing will happen, of course. But if you then try to sell those same stolen items back to them or family friends, if you come back days later, the entire town will now call you a thief and either scowl at you or refuse to do business with you entirely. If instead the town likes you, they will attack bandits that are chasing you out of the woods if they can see it happening, or show you secrets you otherwise would have missed completely. And even just walking around the villages, people will comment on the weather, current events, things you are doing, or things they personally want done. And when you combine this with the dizzying amount of systems in the game that all interact with one another, it's truly breathtaking just how amazing the ecosystems in KCD really are. And another perfect example of this is how there's multiple states of being drunk in the game that you can go through. And people in town will kick you out for being too drunk at times, or you can even get addicted if you drink too much. Every system in the game is just as meticulous as this. For example, every item has its own pickup animation specific to it that feels authentic. And if you steal someone's clothes, the next day they will have to wear something else. Meaning if they were poor and only had one pair of clothes, you get to literally watch as they walk around in town with nothing but their sleeping garments on for work the next day. Money and economies are real, meaning you can gamble with someone else, and if you keep winning, they will eventually reach financial ruin. And really, it's the type of game world where each and everything you do has a meaningful reaction. And while that can make the game feel slow at times, if I'm being honest, it's not for everyone. It does make it all worth it in the end though, because when you realize just how deeply intertwined this ecosystem is with the game design and storytelling, you realize how much other games we're playing are missing out on. On top of this too, the quests in Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 are full of options and ways to tackle them, where you can use your environment to your advantage in any way you see fit. Need to get an item in the guardhouse? If you've read lots of religious books, talk to the guard about why you should be allowed in on account of some biblical scripture. Or what about combing your way through the secret underground tunnels beneath the castle as you sneak your way in? Maybe there's even a nearby farmer who can tip you off on another way to get inside if you help him with something else. And combined in with all of this is a real focus on time commitments and keeping track of days as well. Many of the side quests in game will fail if you don't complete them in time. And if an NPC asks you to meet them in the town square tomorrow at dawn, you need to actually be in that exact location at that exact time, or the quest will fail or carry on in a new way. This isn't a title that cuts corners to make things more fun or easy. It's a game that at every step makes its primary focus immersing you in this ecosystem. And what better way is there to do that than creating a sandbox that is complex in nature and deep in systematic principles? And it once again goes to show why I think immersive sims are the future of this industry. And when you combine their ideas with worlds where at night the sounds of bugs drown out your senses, or you can watch as animals stalk each other in the dense woodlands, you can see as clear as day why complex ecosystems are a key part of the formula as well. And more than any other games we have gone over on this list, KCD proves you can also do this in a AAA presentation and package, and that it's even better for it. So maybe if there was one thing you leave this video thinking about, it's how every game would benefit from complexity in its biomes, ecosystems, and biospheres like this. By my estimations, it simply just makes games better, full stop. Complexity is good, not bad. It's just about finding the balance of having fun as well. But we aren't done proving this point just yet, because we have a lot more amazing and complex game ecosystems to dive into. Unsurprisingly, as someone that loves games and makes videos on them in my free time, and also as someone that works full-time as a software engineer, I've worked on little games here and there. But for some reason, the ideas I always love coming back to when making these little projects tend to revolve around evolution and simulation. To me, the idea of a game that through nothing more than its programming can create complex ecosystems that give birth to new forms of life that all interact with one another with immersive sim elements is my ideal game world. And honestly, if a AAA studio can pull this off in any big budget RPG, I would be over the moon. But in the meantime, there are plenty of smaller indie games that have similar ideas on how to create worlds like this, ecosystems and biomes that revel in intricate simulation factors. However, one of the most interesting that I want to take a look at here is the Sapling. Built from the ground up by one man as a way to simulate the principles of evolution in a sandbox full of a variety of planets, the Sapling lets the player act as a god of sorts, that can either create creatures of their own design and custom tailor a world around them, or even more interestingly, if you turn on the random mutation generator, watch as the world comes to life on its own as well. Because you see, every planet and creature in this game mode has a life of its own. Depending on the rule set of any given planet, things will evolve drastically differently, all while making sense at the same time. For example, one planet you spawn into may have high-density thunderstorms that frequently occur and cause fires to erupt in the grasslands below, which means over time both flora and fauna will fight to adapt. In this world specifically, this means that two plant types became most prominent. One being a small shrub whose seeds would open up when sensing smoke and use it to gather nutrients, while another was a taller tree with fire-resistant bark whose food sources only grew at the top of the tree line, far out of the reaches of the fires below. And because of this, every single animal on the planet also learned to fly or died out. And with each new generation and through different mating cycles, you get to watch as the species evolves more and more to handle their conditions. For example, in this world, one of the flying animals evolved to have larger wings, which allowed it to carry its body through the tree line to pick up multiple fruits at once, even without having to stop, meaning they were able to beat out other flying competition in the area. And really, watching the game unfold like this is just so fascinating. Seeing how life would evolve under different conditions or rule sets, all of which you can change yourself to either affect how the world evolves or see whether your own creations could survive. It's literally a game about creating complex ecosystems, but even more than say older titles like Spore, places an emphasis on each and every part of the world affecting each other. Another great example of this is an icy planet whose sun slowly rotates through the solar system, meaning there are elongated periods of extreme cold on the planet that forces all life deep underground to survive in the interim. But as the sun approaches every decade, the seeds buried beneath the earth begin to sprout, and the animals that have learned to hibernate and conserve energy flourish for a short period of time above ground to mate and multiply. And each and every one of these species that evolve in interesting ways like this comes about because of the environment that has been placed before them. Just like evolution in our real lives as well, survival of the fittest. And it really does immerse you in the entire ensemble, because it feels like even the slightest change you make to how the world works can have drastic effects on how it turns out. To me, worlds with complex ecosystems like this are so interesting because they allow freedom of expression for players, and also freedom of expression for the game world itself. And you see, words will never do it justice just how satisfying it is to see how much your small actions can bear such large fruit, almost like watching a child grow up. And I think the Sapling is a perfect example of why most games would benefit from this style of immersive design with complex ecosystems, where even seemingly innocuous things like the movements of planets or moons and how they affect the ocean lines of a planet are taken into account. It allows for fully emergent and spirited altercations that only happen because of the system's first approach rather than handmade and crafted content. And also, for anyone curious, this is why I personally think that AI in games could be so powerful. It's a controversial opinion many people have found distasteful in my videos or when I proclaim it on my other social media accounts like X. But it's not about taking away jobs from talented developers or removing handmade content. Rather, it's about working in conjunction with the great things people already make to craft worlds that feel alive. Ecosystems that have a mind of their own and evolve with you, that only get more interesting if complex artificial intelligence is added into the mix. And honestly, once again, the Sapling shows us that even in a game world that is otherwise so basic due to the fact that only one man made it, having a complex ecosystem can make all the difference. And in this case, is quite literally where all the fun for this game comes from in the first place. In the pantheon of games that try to form believable worlds, maybe none have done it better than Dwarf Fortress, which is ironic because it might also be the least impressive looking game on this whole list. For those of you who have never tried it, which I'm guessing is most of you, it's an experience that aims to react to anything and everything the player throws at it, all while giving life to entirely unique biomes and ecosystems that change as you play. Originally an entirely ASCII-based text adventure created by Tarn Adams and his older brother Zach, the game has come a long way from its original release in 2006, and in 2022 even had an official sale on Steam with updated graphics and a full soundtrack. The actual flow of the title, though, can best be described as a never-ending procedurally generated world in which you must either grow a fortress of dwarves who try to survive in fortress mode, set out as a hero into the unknown to explore and discover in adventure mode, or review histories and lore behind previous games you have played in Legends mode. It was a novel idea for the time, and went on to inspire many other greats like Minecraft and RimWorld. But the reason I'm choosing Dwarf Fortress as the game to look into compared to these is because of just how complex things can really get. First of all, every time you start a new map in Dwarf Fortress, everything is different. Procedurally generated maps take into account size, length of history, savagery levels, mineral deposits, temperature, rainfall, elevation, drainage, flora, fauna, climate, models, solar system cycles, lunar patterns, meteorite impacts, and hundreds of other small variables that all come together to form a rich history of how this planet came to be, what it looks like, and most importantly, how people live on it. And on top of this, each and every system in the game interacts with one another seamlessly. For example, some rivers lead to oceans while others form lakes. Areas with high rainfall and low drainage become swamps, and every single notable landmass or city gets its own name with an entire rich history of how it came to be, whether through natural forces or political altercations. This isn't just a procedurally generated world with lots of pretty color blocks like, say, Minecraft. This is a living, breathing universe that has a set of rules it adheres to, with thousands of years of history of long-forgotten civilizations, races, religions, and wars all taken into account. And each of them has a drastic effect on not only how the world forms geographically, but also the kind of world you will even be in. What kind of magics can your dwarves use, for instance? Is there even magic in the first place? What other cultures will you encounter and how hostile will they be? What kinds of animals can you find and how will they act? Do people use spoons to eat or chopsticks? Or maybe a new type of contraption that teleports food into your stomach directly, developed by a dwarf named Tittle Tinkerboot? Each and every one of these questions is something you will ask yourself the second you start a new game in Dwarf Fortress. And for many of them, you have options before you start to tailor an experience around exactly what you're looking for as well. But you see, the real beauty of it all is that no matter what you try to make, because of how complex and intertwined all of the systems in the game are, what comes next is completely non-deterministic. Every single dwarf in your empire has their own personality, their own haircut, health and dental records, sexual desires, friends and marriage partners alike, and a personality that constantly evolves over time. And throughout each and every year you play through the game, different factions can form, new political or philosophical ideas can arise from dwarves you saw growing up as children in communities, or discoveries can be made that shake the entire foundations of world economies. But because of this, the game can be extremely difficult at times. You will be managing massive empire-wide revolts or petty squabbles at the local tavern alike. and every single entity in game, whether that's a spoon on the table or a dwarf who is getting payback for another dwarf stealing his girl, is taken into account. It's such a complex ecosystem, in fact, that the best way to show just how awesome it is for someone who hasn't played is to just go over some of the stories from other players, of which there are so many. One of my personal favorites, for example, tells the story of a small dwarven town that had recently discovered writing, and as such, the civilization began to build more and more libraries. The player, realizing more books were needed for these grand libraries, sent out several raids to nearby goblin pits and necromancer towers, with most missions resulting in especially stealthy dwarves bringing back more and more books for study. But unbeknownst to the player at the time, some of the books being brought back were extremely dangerous necromancer tombs on the secrets of life and death, which resulted in a handful of dwarves turning to undead and sadistic rituals. Quickly, a full ban on necromancy and study of the dead was passed into law in the capital, and the remaining necromancers in town went into hiding from local police forces as they hunted them down. In a twist of fate, though, months later, the same goblins who had been raided before launched a massive counterattack with an army that easily bested most of the local militia. But just as the final hunters and fighters were being gutted by the goblins, a dark haze filled the land, and the bodies of those killed began to rise. The necromancers, previously in hiding, in the final hours appeared out of nowhere and raised dead bodies from their former friends to fight back as the final line of defense against the goblin oppressors. Narrowly allowing the civilization to survive, the necromancers were proclaimed heroes and kings, and the people and their traditions changed forever, now enveloped in a trance of their saviors. And it's stories like these that make Dwarf Fortress so special. Narratives that not only are fully emergent and dynamic, but also worlds and ecosystems that reveal an almost dizzying amount of complexity. I've read countless other stories about dwarves that become serial killers using devices developed at science academies, animals that eat the wrong food and become mutated Cthulhian monstrosities out of a nightmare novel, or even the geological makeup of a local area causing mine shafts to collapse, leading to the decimation of entire groups of dwarves. And at the end of the day, what makes ecosystems in games exceptional in the first place is the fact that they can give us stories like these. Amazing moments that we have to tell friends about not because everyone else saw it, but because literally no one else ever will. Stories that form out of procedural ether and systematic design principles that all cascade and push against one another to form fully emergent gameplay on the fly. And the whole reason the third game type in this title is called Legacy Mode is because going back and looking at the history of your empires and people, of the world, is what Dwarf Fortress is all about. A game that fully trusts its players to find their own fun and make up their own solutions to problems, to craft their own unforgettable stories without the need for hand-holding the whole way through. It's why the community motto for the game is, "Losing is fun." You aren't supposed to ever beat Dwarf Fortress. You can't. Rather, each and every new game is a chance to once again get lost in a world unlike anything else you've tried, to overcome obstacles or simply see what the new rules of this new place are. It's a game that more than any other in history is built around the idea of complex ecosystems in games, of places that without a doubt can have an effect on us, but even more interestingly, will carry on whether or not we're even there. And by the way, for those of you who have ever wondered why I think immersive sim game design is the best out there, it's for reasons like this. Because crafting universes that are complex in nature is daunting, but so much more rewarding once players put in the time to understand them. In what other game would you place so much concern about the acidity level of the water in nearby settlements, or how much rainfall happened in a given year because of the drastic effect it could have on literally every other system in the game? And it's also why I think game design is at its best when it's as open-ended and sandbox style as possible, focusing on crafting systems that react with one another in very in-depth ways, rather than cool moments that happen the same every time. For example, in Dwarf Fortress, the entire town becoming necromancers makes perfect sense and happened dynamically because of previous historical events in the narrative and game world that all culminated in something really special. It's what makes games as a medium special in the first place when compared to movies, television, music, or books. And with recent big games like Baldur's Gate 3 and Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, it's obvious complex systems like this are what the masses want. But in terms of games with this ethos, none have a better roadmap of amazing design than Dwarf Fortress. And when you combine these methodologies with the fact that the two brothers have been working on this title for over 2 decades now, you can see why when talking about games with complex ecosystems and worlds, it's impossible not to bring up arguably the most in-depth of them all, Dwarf Fortress. However, there are some other potential candidates as well that I think you guys might find just as interesting.